Salutare și bine v-am regăsit la Transilvania Culturala. Este o mare onoare pentru mine să l-am astăzi invitat pe venerabilul Markus Getzner. A venit la Cluj să vorbească despre răbdare și perseverența entuziastă și a acceptat să vină și la Transilvania Culturală. Hello, welcome to our show.
Yes, thank you very much.
Venerable, I'll start by asking you, how did you turn to Buddhism? How have you met Dharma?
Yes. First, maybe to say it was a very slow approach to Buddhism. In my case, it took quite long time. The first thing what was very how do you say important. I met at when I was about, let's say, 16 years old. I met an old Tibetan master, was Venerable Geshe in that place where the two Romanian monks, Venerable Vlad and Venerable Nicolae, are studying now. There have been mainly two Tibetans. This was this old master, Venerable Geshe and Gen Samdola, these two. And I had no idea, I had even no interest in Buddhism. I just came there, I had to deliver some present there, I brought it there at Christmas. And I went into the kitchen and met these two personalities. And honestly saying, in that time, I had a lot of problems, let's say, with the society, with my parents, and also with school anyway also. And because I always found somehow, as mentioned also the previous time, I've been always told by the grown-ups how one should behave, always told you should be patient, don't be angry, don't be upset. But I have never seen a living example of that. I had always the feeling this is kind of only lip services. And now it was the first time to encounter such a personality like this Venerable Geshe Pemba. I didn't understand what he said, and of course he was only talking Tibetan, but I was very moved. I had really the impression there's somebody, this kind of embodiment of somebody who really can be not disturbed by anything, and is also very, very joyful. This was the first impression I had. And then later, it was first encounter. Somehow it was very moved by that. But I still had no interest in Buddhism, not at all. And later I have an older brother, and he had to do some work in that place because he's working with sculptures, and he was involved in the construction of. He did some parts of. There's a stupa there, and he was a little involved to do some works there. And he told me there is also a younger Tibetan monk there, and if you would have questions, because he knew he had a lot of problems, you could ask the older master there. There's possibility. They're very open, he said to me. And then I went there and had a lot of questions, and especially in relation to how to deal with certain difficulties, or how to deal with the parents, or with one's girlfriend, and there's certain tensions and these things. And he gave answers to me, very, very simple, but very practically. And by that I was extremely moved. And then, but still, as I told you, it was a very slow approach. Then I went to Vienna, and I started to do my studies on fine arts. And being in Vienna, then the years, just 1 year after another passed. But the more I've been there, this old monk came more and more to my mind. I was always remembering. And at a certain point, I had a very strong wish, but it really took a long time. It means the first encounter I was 16 years old, and finally when I come then to the monastery in Switzerland, I was 28. You see, it's a very slow approach. First I met that master. After I was Venerable Gonzo Rinpoche, I was very moved, just to having a short conversation. The clarity, and also how practical these advices have been. But the wish became stronger and stronger until it reached an extent that I somehow had the wish to stay with these, let's say, try to find an opportunity to stay and with these personalities, with this kind of, let's say, with this, so kind of a last generation who came from Tibet, and try to stay with them, learn from them, and that was the approach, let's say, more or less.
It was a step-by-step process.
Yeah, very, very slowly. I didn't approach Buddhism because it can also happen. It's a kind of, sometimes things are, how do you say, people are just attracted because it's something more like a fashion, people,
Yeah.
It can also happen, you just do it because others are also involved in that, and it's kind of, to be kind of insider, you also join, not in that manner, not at all. Very, very slowly approaching to it with a lot of questions and just asking. And sure, one thing which was also very kind of significant or very important was, at that time, when I was 16, my girlfriend, she was very, very sick. She had a kind of throat cancer and a very aggressive kind of cancer. It was very difficult for the treatments and everything. But I was so kind of shocked by that, that somebody who's being so young, being so sick, and so close to death. And then, due to that, I had a lot of doubts and questions, why such a person has to suffer, being so young and being a good person. And then I could ask, to this old master, and the answers I received, they have been very helpful in relation to that, but also in relation to my parents also. I had a lot of tensions with them, and as mentioned yesterday, I didn't see the kindness actually, which one has received. And I had the idea that I'm completely right and they're completely wrong what they do. But the master helped me a lot of understanding. Even he told me, if parents do a lot of faults and do things completely wrong, but still the fact that that you had the possibility that you could take birth, and having all those access to all those things like food and shelter and education, which you received on a daily basis, not just for one day or two, but it's extraordinary. But we forget these things. But how he said it to me, it was so moving, and I've seen these words had a strong impact on my mind, because it was not just lip service of the master. He really was a living example of that, And by that, I slowly I became interested, in the philosophy. And then, but still, as I mentioned, it took still 12 years, until I arrived in Rabdarea, in the place in Switzerland, due to the kindness of Venerable Rinpoche, who also said, it's good you can come, but first you finish your studies. They regard it also important if you're a Westerner and you started something, really do it, bring it to the end, and then you make that step, not just giving up and then starting something new. Yeah, in that manner, just maybe just to conclude it, this living example was for me so important to see that. This was.
And after a while, the decision to becoming a monk was there.
Monk, I was from very early age, I was very attracted. I even didn't know that a Westerner can become a Buddhist monk, For that, it was Venerable Gonzo Rinpoche. I asked him, I was about 18 years old, I think 18 or 19. I asked him once if there's a possibility that Westerners are becoming monk. He said, yes. And he explained, there's no restrictions, becoming monk, ordained, or becoming a nun. It's not only for Tibetans or for Asian people. No, he said. And then, but still I was very attracted by that, but still it took time, because I was also, had relationships with girlfriend, and have been in these relationships, and then it took time. When I was 28 after my studies, then I came to Rabdarea, and when I became monk, then I was 30 years old. But I had a strong wish to appreciate it a lot, and seeing also there's certain, there's a lot of advantages also, and And sure, normally you ask a master also, they will analyze it if it's really the right thing to do, and they will also analyze about the time, you know. For some it's good to become. There will be differences. Some have to wait longer, some do it. It's very individual, depending on many factors, you know. But it was not pushed by somebody from outside. Really, from my side, very strong wish to do that, you know. Somehow, as a monk, you should be kind also of a servant, actually, to the others, without limitations. You know, not having preferences. I'm just saying, I just will meet that person, but not those others I exclude. Not at all. But before I had this problem, you know, before I was a monk, also my relationships, there have been always restrictions, you know. There have been people whom you excluded, whom you didn't like. But as a monk, you should be completely open, you know. You really should be a servant to others, you know, helping them, you know, according to your capacities. Sure, in my case, it's completely limited with everything, but at least one tries to go in that direction, you know. You see also the value, and as also mentioned, I don't know, I even mentioned yesterday, but it's also very natural, because you see, the more you study and come into these understandings, you see really the kindness of others, you know. And then it's a natural outcome. It's the same as you get a cup of tea, naturally you say thank you offering me a tea. It's very natural. And then you understand more and more how much one is really depending. In every moment, you know, we are depending on others, you know. If you really come, not intellectually, as an experience, automatically you, there comes very naturally that, let's say that behavior or attitude that you want to repay it somehow, you know. At least not harming them intentionally, this should be avoided by any means, and then also trying to contribute, to help them, you know, regardless what they are or how they look like, it doesn't matter, you know, or also how they treat you, you know, if they have respect or no respect, or if they abuse you, it doesn't matter, you know. Anyway,
sometimes it's hard to cope with.
No, because the others think, yes, but you know, we should see all the qualities which you try to cultivate, you know, these mental qualities. It can be only done in connection with others. For example, if you want to practice generosity, you need somebody else to whom you offer things, you know. Or I said yesterday, with patience, you need some circumstances or persons who give problems to you to train that capacity. Whatever, you know, it's always in connection with others. Therefore, they're very important, really extremely important. Therefore, it's the kind of central point in Buddhism is not Buddha, it's actually sentient beings, you know.
Yeah.
And one focuses on that very much on the welfare of others, and how do you say, also those who are striving to, what we say, to reach state of enlightenment, the primary, let's say, concern is the welfare of others. You know? This is the primary goal, actually, the primary aspiration, welfare of others.
It's not selfish.
No, not selfish, that I want to become the best, I want to be perfect, you know, no.
And this concerns only me.
This is not that. One is concerned for the others, but then one sees that one is very limited in helping others, assisting them, and then you see in a state which is perfected, you know, that you have really fully developed your mind, a very suitable tool, you know, that's the enlightenment. And that's the second aspiration. For that purpose you try to obtain that in order to have the best means or best tool or method to benefit others to the best extent. It's similar, let's say, I'll give you a simple example. The more knowledge you have, let's say, about languages or skills or handcrafts, the more you have possibility to fulfill the needs of people who want to learn different languages or who want to know how to play an instrument. If you just know one language, sure, you can share it, but it's limited. And therefore, Buddhism is regarded to have these capacities to make them extremely vast. Offers to you and to others, you have more.
Open.
You're more open, and you have also. It's more efficient. There's a greater efficiency
Yes.
in helping others.
You are for the first time in Cluj. Why did you choose to speak about patience?
The first time in Cluj actually is always, it was requested. One of very responsible persons here, is also very kind, is Natalie. She asked, as you know, in Buddhism, things are shared, but always it depends on, there must be a request. It's very important. There is not a kind of, it's also even kind of forbidden to do kind of missionary activities.
I know.
It has to be requested always. And about topic now, this was more a suggestion actually, what could be, just as an introduction, what could be helpful. And I was thinking on patience, because nowadays one can also see, it's quite obvious that in our society there's a lot of aggression, and people often also very kind of short-tempered, very impatient, and also maybe due to, sure, we use a lot of things nowadays where people are used to quick changes through this how do you say, yeah, we are used to quick changes in many things what we use, and people get very easily very impatient if things are a little bit slower. And I thought maybe it's good to talk a little bit about patience, But sure, we had a second topic, what would be about enthusiasm. I also thought it's very important because it emphasizes very strong having the joy in doing wholesome things, This joy. That idea just came to my mind, and then I asked Natalia if it would be okay, or our two venerable Romanian monks, they also, with their help, we try to find out if this is accepted or if this would correspond to the wish. And they said it's okay, and then we came to that. But finally I could not do even one, being too slow.
And you talk about two very practical way to cope with anger.
Yes.
And one of that is analyzing it and the conditions.
Yes.
And another one is trying to be calm with the very small things.
Yes.
To be prepared for the big ones.
Yes.
Could you explain it a little bit?
Yes, as you said, it's true. And in Buddhism plays very important role, plays the analyst, this analytical aspect. Not only, maybe you've heard from Venerable Champa Lundok, and I'm not sure now, but the analysis is done, it means not in a, how do you say, when you do an analysis, you should really take time. Not just very superficially, briefly thinking on something and then again shifting to something else. That when it doesn't work. You really take time to do an analysis on different topics. Now let's say on anger, for example. And when you do an analysis is particularly done, what we also call analytical meditation, is done to become more clarity, get a clarity about. When we don't analyze, we can be quite unclear and confused and so on. But the analysis, if it's done properly, it always leads to better understanding, which is regarded extremely precious. Because being confused about things is the very source for a lot of wrongdoings. When people are confused, clarity helps. It's enormous. How do you say? It has there's enormous quality there if you have a clarity. For that purpose, one does what we call this analysis. But not only that. When we have these understandings through the analysis, in order to familiarize with it, that it stays better in one's mind and one gets familiarized, we do, just to simplify it now, we do what we call as a non-analytical approach to things, a non-analytical meditation. You just focus the mind on this understanding, on that experience. This is particularly done in order to get acquainted with these insights. And now, Therefore, we do it intertwined. We do this analytical approach and a non-analytical. Use both methods. We have to switch from one to the next and going back. Sure, if one is more advanced, if one is really cultivated, concentration, single-pointed concentration, you can do both simultaneously. You're focused on that object and you do an analysis at the same time. Now as a beginner, or like me, I'm a very beginner, I'm not able to do that. But still, when you, let's come back to anger, you, as mentioned yesterday, you really go into the details. First you try to understand really the disadvantages.
There are a lot.
Oh, there's a lot. I just mentioned some. There would be, you can make quite a long list of disadvantages. That means you should come to a conclusion that you understand the ugliness of that state of mind, and how destructive it is. It's one that says all the delusions have this characteristic of being disturbing, but one, let's say, about the destructiveness. So there's the most dangerous is anger or hatred, all those things which derive out of it. Extremely dangerous. Also, when we see in the world, the most threatening, is actually when people become aggressive. What they do under the influence, being overpowered by aggression. It's that when we fear, actually. Therefore, when you see the disadvantages very, very clearly, and you can somehow have that understanding, then it's important when you witness in your mind that there is anger about to arise, then it's very important you should have a remembrance on this understanding. When you're able to remember the shortcomings, that will help to, to pacify the anger. Because you see, it's harmful for oneself, for others, when you act under the influence of anger. And there's a lot of disturbances created by it. There's one way, just by understanding well the disadvantages, and you have to remember it, sure. You have to keep that understanding. There's one way. And sure, people often have not control because normally we have well familiarized, we're quite deep into that. As soon as something is not agreeable to us, let's say if there comes a feeling if the feeling is kind of painful or not agreeable, as an automatic reaction comes this rejection and dislike and aversion, very automatically. It's similar if something is agreeable, also very automatically arises attachment, we're very easily attached to things or situations or whatever, And now one has to learn to respond in different ways to these feelings of let's say, if something is painful and not so agreeable, not just blindly reacting to it. Try a little bit to really to analyze the situation and try to learn to react in different ways, which are more suitable, which are more constructive, instead of just blindly reacting, getting angry. But we are so used to that. Many people, that means...
But we can change our habits.
We can change it, sure, that's a good thing. But we are so deep into certain things that we do it, the reaction it comes very spontaneously. We say all these habits which we do spontaneously is always a sign of that one has already deeply familiarized with it. There's nothing else. This is also, let's say, becomes also very obvious, let's say, when you do a debate, let's say, a philosophical debate,
yes.
And the master asks you something, and as soon as you have to think a lot, how could I answer now? Should I say yes? And if I say yes, why?
If no, why?
No, if no, why? That means if you have to think a lot, it's showing that you're not well familiarized with the topic. If you're really deep into these things, you can see this, really, those who are trained. They answer
come quickly.
Immediately. There's not any kind of hesitation. But it's also a sign of deep familiarization. Or you see it also in music. These great musicians. They have not to ponder now what will come is next. No, it just goes very automatically. It's like they breathe it, it's like the character of them. Why? Because they have familiarized. As said yesterday, through familiarizations, things get easier. On the positive side, but as well as on the negative side. If you have first difficulties, let's say, on the negative side of cheating others, you have some shamefulness and some consideration for others, you feel difficult with it. But then, let's say, through influence of, let's say, bad friends and adopting bad habits, one can get very easily, does not hesitate anymore to cheat others. Just use it, in order to obtain certain things. And at a certain point, you just do it. It's also through power of familiarizing with it. It goes in both ways. But now, sure, here in this context in Buddhism, you use this capacity that things get easier through repetition, through familiarization, through acquainting the mind, cultivating the mind on the positive side. Bad habits, they can be changed. That's a good thing. When one says the delusions, they have only shortcomings, just one good quality, that they can be eradicated.
Yes.
It can be changed. Otherwise, they don't have any qualities.
And you said that it's very important to stop the anger, for example, in the beginning.
Yes, the earlier but it means you should you have to focus your mind inside. If one is always kind of distracted outside, all the time, and not taking care, what's going on in one's mind, it doesn't work. You have to kind of, what I said yesterday, you do an introspection, or you do it with the help of alertness. That means you do an analysis. What's going on in my mind? And when you see a certain delusion is just about to start to grow, then it's quite easy to overcome them. If one is careless, then they get very powerful, these delusions, whatever, pride or attachment or anger, or very negative doubts, you can be completely overwhelmed and by negative doubts and then or wrong views. But at the early stage, they're quite easy to be treated. It's very similar like with a sickness. We regard also these delusions like a sickness. It's an inner sickness.
Yes.
Therefore, in Buddhism, also one regards oneself as a patient. Because one is sick from the disease of the delusions. But if there's an early stage with a sickness, also it can be quite, you don't need very drastic remedies, it can be treated in an easier way. It's very, very similar. When they are just about to arise or to pop up, and you really have this alertness, seeing that, and then there's not so difficult to, let's say, to suppress a delusion or to pacify it. Another thing is if you ask really to eradicate it completely, that's very difficult, That it comes to the point you really need what we call this deep insight into the ultimate reality of phenomena and about emptiness and these things. That's not so easy. But already the step to pacify them is already great, That means what we have in our mind is these delusions must not necessarily always what we call mundugyurva, they must not always manifest, but they are there as a potential, as a latency. And when we come in contact with certain conditions, then they kind of wake up, and manifest. And then when you're able to make them again, to pacify them, is already great. It's already good, And later, sure, one learns, it's also very systematically described, how really to eradicate the very source, which is responsible for all those disturbing thoughts and emotions and negative mental states. So it's all rooted in what we call in ignorance, That's the very troublemaker, is the ignorance, not understanding, and being unclear about the reality. Having a wrong understanding, actually.
I think that there is a link between patience and enthusiasm and enthusiastic perseverance, maybe experiencing that things. There will come
Yes.
the second.
This is all whatever you take, you know, this is also these qualities, these mental qualities, you know, or like let's say patience and enthusiasm also. But you can also take other things, like let's say when you take pure love, when you really cultivate it. These things are never isolated. You're not focusing just on one thing. They always go together with many other qualities you also develop. Because, for example, when let's say it's embedded, you know, in how do you say, in many other good qualities which one cultivates. It's not just one single thing isolated. For example, let's say we had yesterday patience, you know. When you really want to cultivate it, you also need enthusiasm. You know, for example, this enthusiasm, you know, actually it is just briefly, it's this having this joy in doing the wholesome things, you know, very deep joy. And to practice patience is not so easy, you know. But when you see the value in it, then also one engages in these things with joyfully.
Yes.
With joy. It's not, how do you say, when you see everything is so hard and so difficult, that everything becomes so heavy, you know, one will be not able to complete the practice or when one will give up very easily, you know. When you feel it's too heavy, then one say, "Oh no, maybe it's not suitable for me. I'm too old already." These are all actually excuses. It's an expression of laziness, actually. And one of the antidotes against laziness is, in particular, is enthusiasm. It's really this joy in the wholesome. And also here, in the wholesome implies also patience and all other things. Also when you cultivate wisdom, you need, it's indispensable, you need enthusiasm. Also yesterday we didn't come to the point, this patience which understands, you know, that in order to get a certainty about the phenomena, how things exist, all these reflections about interdependence, and also to understand why another person becomes angry and so on. Also you must be extremely patient. You know, because it takes time.
Yes.
There's many points in the philosophy that are really difficult to understand, especially what we call cause and effect, you know, what we call karma, actions and the results. They're very difficult, very subtle. But also you need the patience with these points, you know, not giving up, you know, not losing the energy to further engage in these things. If you just give up because it's difficult, you reach nowhere. It needs, it's so important, a certain steadfastness, you know. You're stable and do things continuously. This is very much emphasized. And therefore, also for cultivating patience, you need enthusiasm. It would be wrong to think first you develop patience, you don't need any enthusiasm, and later there comes enthusiasm. No, it goes all hand in hand, you know. You should support each other. You know,
why it's so difficult to overcome these difficulties? Because they're looking very logical and natural, but you have to practice and cope with that, and it's not very easy at all.
Not easy at all to
cope with anger, for example.
It's not easy to cope with anger. Yeah, I just would maybe, I'm sorry, I will just say this similar thing as before. Yeah, it's true, it's not easy. We have so well familiarized with anger as a reaction. We're so deep into that. Now we have somehow to educate our mind in a completely different direction, which actually opposes, you know, which is really kind of contradictory. You know, to overcome anger, you have to cultivate something which opposes in its nature. You cannot overcome anger with anger. It's also one of the wrong thinkings, you know, ideas in the world. You cannot overcome violence with violence.
Yes.
It just leads to increasing of violence. It's very obvious.
Yeah.
You can also not overcome anger.
It's like bombing for peace.
Yes, bombing for peace, yes, it's true. But some people really use this, even saying, even there was one aeroplane, a big bomber, I think from the United States, that was written on the aeroplane, infinite justice, you know. It's all nonsense. You know. You cannot, there's no bombing for peace, you know. It just leads to the conflict will be more and more extended, more sufferings, more destructions of beings and destruction of resources and so on. It gets endless. One sees very clearly in many places in the world. It's quite obvious. Therefore, normally it's true what you say. It's not so easy. Sure, we are deep into these things, but it can be changed little by little, you know, slowly. And one should be also realistic. You know, if you have expectations, let's say you obtain in a short time great insights and big changes by doing, let's say, a meditation week or just reading a book. This is counterproductive because one will be disappointed. It really takes time, little by little, and then afterwards,
you need to have patience.
You have to be patient. Yes, you have to be very, very patient. And then, sure, there are many factors which play also a role in that process. It depends. Each of us has his own individual background, you know, we say karmically also. For some it's easier to learn certain things or to adopt a wholesome lifestyle. For some it's more difficult. It depends also on the environment. If you have people who support you, you know, which are kind of good examples, or you are surrounded by people who have very, let's say, bad behaviors, and as long as we are not really stable, it has an influence. The more you advance, you know, you really become stable, it doesn't matter where you are. Even if you're together with people who have very bad behaviors, and like drinking and gambling and taking drugs, you will be not affected by that. But if one is not so stable, oneself has also this tendency taking these things like drugs and you're just surrounded by them, you will be very easily again in these things. Therefore, it plays a role. But sure, it's always very important. Also, if people have a very, very bad behaviors, one should never condemn them or look down on them. It's very important to be compassionate to them. But sure, sometimes also be important if one is unstable to keep some distance, you know. But always be compassionate to them. And in case if you're really stable, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's similarly said for somebody who cultivates, let's say, if you really want, for a beginner, is let's say, an environment with a certain silence that's easier to, let's say, to meditate. You know, because if one is not so well trained with things, we are easily distracted by sound and this and that. But the more a practitioner advances, it doesn't play any role anymore. You can practice everywhere, you know. Doesn't matter if it's noisy, if it's dirty. It's not depending on these things. But for a beginner, it's important. It helps, you know, a little bit.
We've talked a lot about our anger and how to cope with it, but which is the proper way to cope with others' anger?
With others' anger?
You speak about that person who hit you with a stick.
Yes.
And you...
Yes. Yeah, first maybe also to mention, I didn't mention yesterday, this patience does not mean that you accept everything what happens. Let's say when somebody comes with a stick, and let's say you practice patience, you're not saying, okay, now here's my head, just hit on it. You know, it would be stupid. You know, it would be very stupid. Sure, you try also to avoid that situation. Either you run away, or if you know certain techniques to eliminate him, you know, without damaging his life, sure, you can apply that. The most important is the inner way of reacting to these things. That means you still should, if you're really deep into patience, you are not disturbed. You remain really very calm.
And it's important to understand that even the person who hits you, it's also like a stick. So
yes,
controlled
he's used by his delusions.
Yes.
Exactly. He's pushed or dominated. He has no kind of independent free will. He's pushed by his delusions. You know? Therefore, one should also distinguish, and this is very important, for practitioner, in the practice. One should distinguish between the person and the faulty behavior which is induced by the delusions. If you really want to pinpoint the troublemaker, it's the delusions, it's the hatred or the ignorance in the mind of the other being. That's the troublemaker. And therefore we distinguish very well between the faulty action and the person. You don't get angry at the person, it would be wrong. There's a big difference also if you say, I'll give you just an example to make it more clear. Let's say somebody is stealing, let's say, Sure, the action of taking something which is not given is ethically, it's regarded as not correct, because it also creates certain problems and sufferings for others who take things, But there's a big difference if you say there is a person who has taken something which has been not given, there's a person who has stolen a certain item, or if you just say he is a thief, Because at that moment when you think, oh, he's a thief or he's a robber, there very easily generates this idea in our mind, because we have this strong grasping to permanence, he always remains being thief, he always remains being bad, he is bad, But it's just very temporary event, to certain situations and circumstances. He's forced to take something due to his delusions, which doesn't belong to him. That's all. You can say the action is fault. That creates problems. But we easily have the idea of just saying he is bad, very bad guy, and then it remains in our ways of thinking. Oh, very bad person. But a person can change in between. So many possibilities of changes. He can even regret his action. He can be still very kind person. There's no contradiction. Therefore, it's very important to understand when somebody is coming, when you say how to deal with the anger of others, often people, the way how they react to the anger of others is not skillful. It's not very wise. Therefore, these conflicts actually they increase. As mentioned yesterday, if somebody is hitting you, if you hit back, it's not skillful. It's not the best solution. It makes things more complicated. And I think also there's no need if somebody gets upset that you also get upset. This is really completely unnecessary. And also with shouting, if somebody shouts, it's up to you if you shout back or not. There is no need to shout back. And also if somebody criticizes you, let's say in front of others, which is very unpleasant for oneself, there's no need to criticize him then. But even if it's critics, also one should be realistic. If the critics are really pinpointing a fault which one has, but that's very good, it's showing, yes, I have that fault, it's true.
Thank you for showing me that.
Yeah, showing me that, And if you criticize something which you don't have that fault, you are not becoming through that, let's say, it doesn't matter, if somebody criticizes you for faults which you don't have, you will not have these faults then. You will not go down through that, It's the same if you're praised for qualities which you don't have, through that you don't have the qualities. It's also what is helpful if these things are happening, also see these things in the light of impermanence. Because if you are criticized, we have often the idea, that's something so concrete, now he says such bad words to me, and it appears like a big lump of something, which is very threatening for oneself and damaging. But finally it's just a few syllables, which have been uttered. Anyway, they're already gone, but we cling so strongly, and see, unpleasant, and then we react. But if you really also, when you're well into these deep familiarization about impermanence, how transitory these things are, so short-living, just very temporary, arising, ceasing.
Maybe
there is not any kind, you just let it pass,
Maybe
These are ways of reacting, and you will see it affects the other person. Maybe they will be also surprised, but normally they're used to. If they criticize, they're used. Oh no, there will come something back, and then again criticizing, and then it goes. Just.
And also, I understand that if you react kindly, you dissolve others' anger or fury.
There's possibility there, yes.
Maybe here it's important to explain a little bit about delusion, impermanent, and I think there is about emptiness and vacuity.
As mentioned yesterday, all delusions, all of them have this very disturbing character. When they arise in our mind, they are very, very disturbing. It's one of the main features of delusions. But also in addition, there are many shortcomings, like not understanding a situation, like not understanding the phenomena to which they refer to. As said yesterday, like let's say attachment, is very similar to anger. The attachment kind of over-exaggerates the positive, let's say the appealing aspect of the object, and through that it appears the object extremely pleasing, but this leads then to the, to the internal reaction that one has a very strong longing for the object, have this very strong longing, wishing to possess it, to have it, to experience that object, to have it. But also connected with that, there's a lot of wrong behaviors. Because one is so attached to, there's a lot of fears also. With attachment is very close, fear also connected. You have the fear not to get the object which you are attached to. Or if you have the object, you have the fear to lose the object. But then attachment is extremely egocentric. You try to have these things in order to satiate one's own desires very, very strongly. And in order to get the object, if one is really strongly attached, one is also ready to do very negative things. Really very negative. To cheat or to all different things, even to kill, if it's necessary, to get object of attachment. The attachment is extremely, very self-centered, often people make the mistake of the idea that attachment is a kind of is love or pure love, but it has nothing to do. It's completely different, Because the pure love is it's very altruistic. It's only the concern for the welfare of the others. Of
and
the
unconditional.
happiness. Yes, unconditional, exactly. But the attachment has always these demands, and expectations, particularly.
Yeah.
If the expectations are not fulfilled,
you're disappointed.
you're disappointed, and disappointment and frustration is the breeding ground for anger. We didn't come to that point yesterday, but it shows how much anger is linked to attachment. Because attachment has a lot of demands, and if they're not fulfilled, we are unhappy.
Yeah.
And that's the breeding ground for anger. And also we can see if a relationship is very much based on attachment, let's say, and if, let's say, these demands are not anymore fulfilled, let's say the person is not anymore so attractive than before, let's say it also deteriorates, let's say the outer appearance, the person gets old or gets sick or becomes more complicated, the behavior of the person. When you have an aversion, it's a clear sign that you have attachment to the person. If you have this unconditioned love, it even gets intensified. You have more concern for the person, to help, to assist. But if you feel kind of annoyed because the person becomes more difficult in the way of behaviors and is not anymore so attractive, it's a clear sign that you have been only attached to the person. There's no love. Therefore, then comes really the ugly face, let's say, of the attachment. It becomes very obvious. Before, it's like a mask before, It appears very nice, it tries to please. It has the appearance of love, but in its very nature, it's completely something which is completely opposed to love. It's very self-centered, extremely egoistic. You use the other just for one's own desires, and it's very tricky, Often they're so mixed, with other states of mind. But anyway, if attachment or other delusions, if you take them, they're always very disturbing, you know. Sure, one may ask, what's about laziness, you know, let's say laziness of idleness, just wish not to do anything. It's not disturbing, it feels quite comfortable, isn't it? But also it has disturbing characteristic in the sense of it becomes great obstacle for the development of the mind. You know, if, let's say if you want to cultivate concentration, laziness is a great obstacle. In that sense, it's disturbing. But they all share this characteristic of being very disturbing, and also the outcome of delusions is always something very negative and destructive. You know, if you're pushed by delusions. This is very universal. There's no difference. You know, when the anger arises in a Buddhist, it's very unpleasant and very destructive. If it's in a Christian person or a Muslim, there's no difference. Or atheist, it's always something very disturbing and creates a lot of problems and sufferings. And therefore, we call these delusions, as mentioned yesterday, that's the real enemy. You know, this inner enemy. And somebody who overcomes delusions, you know, we say is a kind of foe or enemy destroyer, like an arhat. We have this term in arhat. It means somebody who has conquered the inner delusions, not an external enemy. They say it's anyway stupid, because this external enemy, if you are patient and you wait, anyway they will pass away after some time. There's no need to kill them, you know. Therefore, it's often compared with, says, to kill them is like stabbing the corpse. You know, this is nothing extraordinary. One has to overcome inner enemy. Just briefly about delusions. But it's very important to study about the nature of these delusions, what is their characteristics, and how they come into existence, in order to be able to recognize them at an early stage. Because some appear quite harmless, you know, but if you understand them better, it's easier to recognize them at an early stage and to do something against them. You know, therefore it's important to know the characteristics.
How important is it in this respect to have a master?
Oh, very important, you know, not only with that, you know, it's very key actually. You know. I would say all those scriptures and all those things, without a master, it remains completely closed, the door. You can read, but
yeah,
it's very important. But
you
sure,
said it's like you look at the medicine, but you don't take it. And you describe the qualities.
And this is also one thing, you know, let's say, master is, let's say, even in ordinary fields of knowledge, you know, also we know how important is a good teacher, whatever, in the fields of learning, let's say, an instrument, or learning some handcrafts, or learning on medicine, or whatever. It's very much depending. If you have good teachers, it's indispensable, you know, because there's a transference of these experiences.
Yeah.
You don't have it just alone from the scripture. You need, you know, master helps you. He opens somehow the door that you really get access to these things. But also, what is important is that food is very important. The master should have certain qualities. It's also very precisely described what the qualities the master should have. But even if the master has a lot of qualities, there's also interdependent existence, master, disciple. The disciple should also have certain qualities, you know. If the disciple is very lazy, you know, or very biased, or very not intelligent, you know, not able to discriminate what is wrong, what is right, it's a great obstacle, even if you have a great master in front of you. Master is, for us, is like, is indispensable for any kind of mental growing and understandings and development. Is so important, so important. It is similar like parents for the child, you know. A child would not be able to survive without parents, you know, extremely. And in relation to a spiritual growing, also, you're completely depending on a master. You know. For many people, it's very difficult. I think for the Westerners, often they have the idea just a book is sufficient. Why is it not like that? Oh. But also here with master, there is one says to look for a master or to search, and one should really take time. It can also take many years, let's say, not too long, and there's the risk that the master passes away in the meantime, but it says it can last even 12 years, That you check that you really have a good behavior and all those qualities, how it's described, Then one can rely, on such a person, and then it's a great benefit for oneself. But sure, there's also it can also happen nowadays in a degenerated time that people announce themselves being a master, but they're not really qualified, and then the disciples kind of blindly follow, and then finally everything ends up in a big disaster. Therefore, this is the task of the disciples. You have to check that also, do an analysis. The master analyzes the disciple, and the disciple has to analyze the qualities of a master. And if it's done well, and then it becomes something very fruitful, extremely fruitful, very helpful.
We are all looking for happiness.
Yes.
And Buddhism studied that for centuries. Which is the proper way to cope with our lives? Someone maybe not want to become a monk.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary.
No need. No need. There are the different lifestyles. There have been also even great masters in Tibet. They had family and everything.
I know.
Like Master Marpa and so on. This is just a lifestyle, a certain lifestyle to become an ordained person. But it also can be as a lay practitioner, having family or working outside in the society. You can be a great practitioner. Even you can be, let's say, you have an idea. To be a religious person or being a completely worldly person doesn't depend on the place where you stay. You can wear even the monk's robe, you stay in a monastery and go to attend the prayers and classes, but you can be extremely worldly. And you can have on the other side a person who lives outside, has a family, goes to the factory every day, but you can be a religious person. Now, on what does that depend? Being religious or being a worldly person depends on one's attitude. As maybe you've heard, I don't know, a worldly person has the main concern, what we say about eight, we call this eight worldly dharmas, these 8 things which somehow dominates, what is dominated by very strong clinging to 4 things, that means you're very strongly attached to gain, and to comforts, and to praise, and very strongly attached to hearing pleasant things, very strongly attached to. That does not mean that there's a fault to experience these things. There's nothing wrong if you, let's say, if you experience some comforts or you have access to some gain. There's nothing wrong. But it becomes problematic when you're too strongly clinging to these things. And the opposite is when you have very, very, very strongly wishes, feels very, very much kind of depressed by the fact to experience the opposite of them. That means some loss, or when you experience some discomfort, either from the climate or the place or whatever. You feel completely overwhelmed, very irritated, or by some critics already. You feel, oh, it's too much. Why they're criticizing me? And so on. Oh. So, and also to hear unpleasant things. That means when you have this attitude, we say it's very worldly, because through that, when you're so strongly attached to certain things and try to avoid the other things by any means, you remain very unbalanced. There will be always ups and downs. And that is very worldly also, extremely. You will always be very agitated with ups and downs and liking and dislike. And that's not, how do you say, it's not a good foundation for the development or cultivating one's mind. Therefore, a religious person is quite, how do you say, it's quite easygoing. If there is some gain, okay, it's not so, one is not overjoyed by that. And if there's some loss, also you accept it, The same is with critics and unpleasant things to hear, and so on and so on. Therefore, become again like yesterday. It always comes back to the mind. It's your attitude, which plays somehow the key role. It's not the cloth, not the place, finally. Sure, there are lifestyles as a monk or a nun, but there's none. It can also help, sure, or you dedicate more to the studies in these things. But there's many possibilities to practice outside of a monastery, or just coming time to time to a monastery from out. We have people who come from outside, or just for one meditation week a year. It's also fine. There's many ways. It's not so to practice. But finally, sure, the practice should always be a condition or something. When you do it properly, it should always contribute that you become more kind, more noble in the sense of being kind to others, and more, how do you say, open. And these things are very important. If you practice something and you become more complicated, and you get more narrow, and you exclude others, then it's something going completely wrong. It's just the opposite, extremely open. But sure, maybe just to say, what you try is to get more and more detached. Detachment does not mean you have to abandon all these objects. You have to give everything away, and this is same like we have this term to be renounced. This renunciation. Often people have the idea it means you have to give up all your family members and don't have any contact with them. You have to give up the society and your friends. You have to give up every possessions. That's not the meaning of to be renounced. It's mainly the meaning is you try not being attached to these things, being detached. Because the fact that you give everything away does not. You can give everything away, but you can be still very attached. You may think, oh, how nice it would be if I would have this and that. Anyway, when we use things normally, you can also have this attitude very strongly. You don't see it as it's a belonging of you. It belongs to me. You just see it's something which belongs to others. There's one approach to things. Or when you see nice things, beautiful things, let's say, whatever, persons or landscape or houses and so on, instead of having always this thought, oh, how nice it would be if it would belong to me,
forever.
You offer it to others. How nice it would be if the others would have, to offer it to others mentally. There's no need to utter it. These things are done in order really to overcome this very strong grasping what we have, related to egoism. Also, when we are strongly attached to things, when there's strong attachment, anyway, there's always this problem. Things one will never find a level that one is satisfied. There's not a saying, okay, now it's enough.
You always want more.
We want more. If you have, let's say, 100 euros, you think, oh, how nice it would be if I have 500. If 500, how nice it would be if I have 1,000. There's no limit.
Yes.
That's just an example. This is the problem. Therefore, we say we can use these things, but we should use it with a certain wisdom. That means with a certain understanding, and also with contentment and satisfaction. If this is not there, how much you have, you will always remain very poor, because you have always the impression, I have not enough, there's still need for more things. And about emptiness, I'm not the right person to answer that, but just maybe briefly. Emptiness is very important also, but here also one should understand it refers to the aspect of wisdom aspect. And maybe you've heard in Buddhism, both is very important, the wisdom aspect as well as the method. Method incorporates all those things like generosity, ethics, and patience, enthusiasm, concentration. All these things are very important, but they should be somehow nourished or sustained by wisdom. The wisdom is extremely important. For example, I'll give you a simple example. If you are generous, let's say you have the wish to give something, that's already very, very positive, But in order that the action of giving really becomes something very useful and beneficial, it's very much depending on wisdom. In order to know what to give, when to give, how to give that item to whom, in what manner, it plays a very important role. Therefore, we can often see also instances where people give, they're very generous, but it's the wrong thing what they offer to others. It can be even very harmful also. Therefore, you need this wisdom. Whatever we do, actually, when we're deep into these things, it should be sustained by the wisdom. That it nourishes you, like a mother nourishes a child with the milk she gives. It said also, whatever we do should be nourished by the wisdom. And this about emptiness is also one aspect of wisdom. There are many different kinds of wisdoms, and emptiness is this understanding about the ultimate mode of existence of phenomena, because we have that idea
that they are real.
They have, especially that they exist independently, just from their side, the objects, not depending on cause and conditions, not depending on parts, not depending on a denomination, not depending on the perceiving consciousness, just from their side they're as stable as this and that. But it's wrong. This is wrong. Now the emptiness is nothing else, it's a negation. It negates. What does it negate? It's similar when you say the cup is empty, you exclude something, What do you exclude? It's full, and you exclude it. But here, the emptiness is very important to understand what is the object of negation, what does it exclude? Emptiness excludes independent existence, that phenomena exist from their own side, independently. That is excluded. That's the meaning of emptiness. Why are the things don't exist independently? Because they only exist in an interdependent way. If you describe things on a conventional level, then you describe it with the help of interdependence. It's depending on causes and conditions and so on. And with the emptiness is the approach to negating. You understand?
Yes.
When you describe with cause and effect, is more approach through affirmation, you see, because there's a certain cause and conditions that is produced, and so on. Since they're existing interdependently, they're devoid or empty of existing independently. That's another approach from the other side, through negation, through excluding. There's nothing more. Sure, it's not so easy really one has to realize these things directly.
Yeah, to experience.
You have to experience, exactly. It's similar like eating chocolate, If you never ate chocolate, you can describe it, but really, in order to know what it is from this, you have that experience. Also here, finally, all those things one should have, that's the best, a direct experience, that's the best. But sure, in order to come there, first these intellectual, correct understandings are also important and indispensable. Indispensable. And also when you read a book, let's say, also through that you also generate what we call the wisdom which generates out from reading, from hearing, or let's say, we say hearing because it refers when you receive a teaching from a master, you listen. But also when you read, also you get a certain understanding. Even it's very rough, but it's already something very precious, very, very precious, because it counteracts already some kind of ignorance. Also these things exist on many, many levels. Ignorance, also wisdom. In that sense, it's very helpful to read, And sure, if one has an explanation from a qualified master, then it opens extremely, just opening the doors to these things, it helps a lot, Because the master has this direct experience of these things. This has completely different impact. It's also said, this Venerable Champa Lundok told me once, I think also he said you can, when you have a page of a book, if you hear the same text read by somebody who has no experience, just reading it, and then the same passage is read by somebody who had the experience, it's completely different. There's a difference.
Impact,
exactly. But sure, these things are subtle, very, very subtle. Maybe just to conclude, it is similar like there's a difference between a person who is just talking about pure love, or pure compassion, but not practicing at all, or somebody who's really practicing, living it, having this living example, this vivid form is so important. From that we learn,
Thank you.
You're welcome, you're most welcome.
Mulțumesc și dumneavoastră că ați fost alături de noi. Aceasta a fost Transilvania Culturală. Ne vedeți de asemenea și pe Facebook și pe YouTube. Vă mulțumim încă o dată, toate cele bune!